Hi friends. So as most of you are aware, I am not at exactly 100% today, but I'm going to give you what I have and what I was able to spend some time on this week before started feeling bad and try and share it with you. So bear with me. As we start, we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 58. I want to read the passage to you. I'm going to read the whole chapter, and then I'll encourage us to take a few moments of silence. I'm actually going to speak the words, "This is the word of the Lord." You can respond with "Thanks be to God," and then we'll take some silence, allow the passage to sit for a moment before we dive into it a little more deeply, before I share some words that I have on it. So here's the passage from Isaiah 58. It says, "Shout with the voice of a trumpet blast. Shout aloud. Don't be timid. Tell my people Israel of their sins. Yet they act so pious. They come to the temple every day and seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a righteous nation that would never abandon the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want to be near me. We have fasted before you," they say. "Why aren't you impressed? We've been very hard on ourselves and you don't even notice it." "I will tell you why," I respond. "It's because you're fasting to please yourselves. Even while you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. What good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarreling? This kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with me. You humble yourselves by going through the motions of penance, bowing your heads like reeds bending in the wind. You dress in burlap and cover yourself with ashes. Is this what you call fasting? Do you really think this will please the Lord? No, this is the kind of fasting I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free and remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. Then when you call, the Lord will answer. 'Yes, I am here,' he will quickly reply. Remove the yoke of oppression. Stop pointing your finger and spreading vicious rumors. Feed the hungry and help those in trouble. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry and restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your cities. Then you will be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't pursue your own interest on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath and speak of it with delight as the Lord's holy day. Honor the Sabbath in everything you do on that day, and don't follow your own desires or talk idly. Then the Lord will be your delight. I will give you great honor and satisfy you with the inheritance I promised to your ancestor Jacob. I, the Lord, have spoken." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen. I think that a great mistake that we make when it comes to looking at Sabbath is not recognizing that Sabbath is supposed to be enjoyable. It's not only a blessing that we get to stop and that we get to rest, which we've talked about the last couple of weeks. It also is a blessing because God intends for Sabbath to be a joy. In Isaiah 58, the passage we read, it calls it a delight. It says to enjoy the Sabbath. It is a delight. Sabbath is supposed to be fun. But many of us have never heard this. We've never been taught that somehow Sabbath should be enjoyable. We've never considered the possibility that maybe Sabbath is supposed to be something that we enjoy, something that we look forward to. Sabbath is more than rules. It's more than rules of what we can do and what we can't do, what does or doesn't fit into a day. It's more than participating in a church service, which we may or may not enjoy being a part of. Now, sure, it includes eliminating some things from that day of the week. It also includes adding some special practices that are an important part of that week. But in this adding and subtracting, it really is about us experiencing the joy God has created for us to delight in. This adding and this subtracting is about coming to delight in God and what God is doing in us. In Genesis 1 and 2, which we read a few weeks ago, we saw that God delighted in all that God had created. And as God finished creation, we're told that he did so with the creating of a special day. And on this day, all that had been created was invited to delight in creation with God. God created Sabbath as a chance to enjoy God's creation. This week, as I was trying to prepare and look through this passage, I read through Isaiah 58 over and over again. I kept wrestling with what was there, and I read it in a multitude of translations, and I kept looking at different commentaries and books that were telling me more about it. And the truth is that the passage is overwhelming, that these 14 verses are huge. There's so much to take in. And I actually wrestled with the passage more than I expected to personally wrestle with it. We could spend weeks on these 14 verses and still barely scratch the surface. Excuse me. One of the things that I kept getting tripped up on was this strange mention of Sabbath that comes at the end. Now, honestly, that was the preaching plan the entire time, was for me to look at this strange mention of Sabbath that comes at the end. But as I did so this week and I read through the entire chapter, it didn't feel like it fit with all that was there in Isaiah chapter 58. In the New American Standard Version of the Bible, we find that one of those subtitles that get added, they're not part of the inspired text, but they get added to help make it easier for us to read. It actually separates the chapter into two sections. And the Sabbath piece is sectioned off as something different. And I think that we have often, in our teaching and our preaching, separated Isaiah 58 into two separate passages. The first part, which talks about fasting and about caring for others, I've preached on that part. And I love that part of Isaiah 58. I love it in a really hard way. It's a difficult passage. It causes us to wrestle with our thoughts and our understanding of our spiritual practices. But it's such a beautiful passage. I preached on the last part of it, the Sabbath piece, and that was the plan for today. It was to look at Sabbath and really to not pay that much attention to what comes before it and the talk of fasting. But this week, as I read it, it seems that there is a reason that these sections, that these topics, that all of this is included in what Isaiah is talking about at this point. I think that God asked the prophet Isaiah to tell God's people to stop messing up the spiritual practices that God had given them in order to foster new life. So Isaiah 58 starts with talking about legalism and talking about using religious rituals in order to look holy. Isaiah says that they're going through the motions and that they wanted to be celebrated for it. They looked really spiritual with their fasting practices and their Sabbath practices, but it wasn't leading to transformation. It wasn't leading to life change. It wasn't leading to a change in their culture or their environment or the way they treated people. They were pretending to do the things God wanted them to do, or maybe they were actually doing the things they thought God wanted them to do, but they were doing it without becoming the people that God wanted them to become. They'd missed the point of these practices and what was happening with them. So Isaiah says, no way. No way, stop it. Real fasting is not about missing a couple meals and then going back to life as normal. Isaiah says that real fasting is about abstaining from food temporarily, and in the process of that, recognizing that there are people who go without food all of the time. Real fasting, real worship, really living the way God has created people to live is about justice and caring for the poor and feeding the hungry and protecting the vulnerable. It's about rejecting one's own power position over others. It's about elevating the status of the powerless. This is what real fasting looks like, Isaiah says. And when we participate in this kind of fasting, verse 9 says, then when you call, the Lord will answer, yes, I am here. He will quickly reply. So then we find this transition where Isaiah has dealt with their fasting practice and now transitions to their Sabbath practice, encouraging them to repair the way they're practicing Sabbath. So not just fixing or critiquing fasting, but also doing the same with Sabbath. Reminding them that Sabbath is not a self-serving practice. Also that it's not simply about following the rules. Peter Scazzaro, in his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says, one of the great dangers of faithfully observing Sabbath is legalism. Sabbath is not about looking holy for one day and then going back to just life as normal. Sabbath, when done rightly, is about setting aside a day of the week with the understanding that it will change the entire rest of our week. Sabbath is about declaring that we are God's people. Sabbath is about restoring justice. Sabbath is about recognizing that our value is not in our work that we accomplish, but that our value instead is in the work that God is doing and has done in us, the work that God is doing through us. So Isaiah 58 says, keep the Sabbath day holy. Don't pursue your own interests on that day, but enjoy the Sabbath and speak of it with delight as the Lord's holy day. Honor the Sabbath in everything you do on that day. And don't follow your own desires or talk idly. Then the Lord will be your delight. There's this interesting kind of cyclical thing that I notice in what Isaiah seems to be doing here. He seems to be saying that if you and I commit to delighting in Sabbath and Sabbath practice, that in doing that, we come to the place where we delight more fully in God. And as we delight more fully in God, we delight more fully in our practice of Sabbath. It's this cyclical kind of motion of embracing the day for the purpose of embracing God. And as we embrace God, we come to delight or enjoy the day even more thoroughly. We delight in Sabbath. We delight in God. We delight in restoring creation. We delight in setting things right with other people. And this is how right Sabbath practice and right fasting collide. And I think it's why Isaiah brought the two together and called for them to be practiced rightly, because in practicing them rightly, we restore creation, we restore relationships. And I don't think he used the word delight or enjoy by accident. I think that part of how we maintain the holiness of Sabbath is by enjoying it. It isn't only about stopping work, going to church, taking a nap, although all of those things are really great Sabbath practices. It's also about joy and delight and fun and play. It's a day that God has given us to enjoy all that God has created. A day to delight in all that God has given us. A day to play in God's creation. Sabbath is an opportunity for us to notice the beauty that surrounds us all of the time. And all of this for the purpose of experiencing God more fully. I want to read to you several quotes from some authors who I think really do a great job of nailing down this idea of delighting in Sabbath. Ruth Haley Barton, in her book Sacred Rhythm, says, "Do not make Sabbath keeping a weighty exercise. Explore it with delight, as though you and God are learning together how to make the day special for both of you." Peter Scazzaro says, "As part of observing Sabbath, God invites us to join in the celebration, to enjoy and delight in his creation and all the gifts he offers us in it." He also says, "Through any and every means possible on Sabbath, we seek to feast on the miracle of life with our senses." Elsewhere, he writes, "On Sabbaths, God also invites us to slow down, to pay attention and delight in people." And this one, creation and life are, in a sense, God's gift of a playground to us. Matthew Sleeth, a doctor, wrote in his book 24/6, "Sabbath is a weekly reminder of all that is good in God's world." And then Wayne Muller, one of my favorites, as he writes about Sabbath, he beautifully captures the idea of delight in Sabbath over and over again in his book Sabbath, Finding Rest, Renewal, and Delight in Our Busy Lives. I'm going to read several quotes from him. He says, "In Sabbath time, we remember to celebrate what is beautiful and sacred. We light candles, sing songs, tell stories, eat, nap, and make love. It is a time to let our work, our lands, our animals lie fallow, to be nourished and refreshed." Another one, "Remember to play and bless and to make love and eat with those you love and take comfort easy and long in this gift of sacred rest." One more, "Spend the day napping and eating what is left over in the refrigerator. Play a game with your children. Take a walk, have a cup of tea, make love, do nothing of any consequence or importance." These authors seem to have grabbed hold of what it is that Isaiah was calling the people of God to delight in Sabbath, to enjoy it. Sabbath is this opportunity for us to enjoy life, an opportunity for us to experience the multitude of things that we've been blessed with. So what is it that you take joy in? Where do you find delight? What do you love doing? Sabbath is this opportunity for us to recognize that God has blessed us with a requirement to do these things, to play, to delight, to have fun. I wonder if sometimes children are actually the best at understanding delight. They seem to be so much better at it than we are, don't they? Maybe in order for us to practice this part of Sabbath well, we actually need to put children in charge of what it is that we do on the Sabbath. Can you imagine what it looks like to have 2 desserts, to eat ice cream for breakfast, go paint a picture, play in a puddle, go for a swim, run in the park, pick flowers by the side of the road, play games? We're invited to enjoy all that God has given us, to delight, to enjoy. Now, a quick word of caution, because Isaiah also speaks to this a bit. Speaks to the idea that Sabbath is not supposed to be self-serving. It's not just about me and what I want to do. And I think that when we talk about delight, we can dangerously head in that direction. We can become very self-centered and very self-focused. But we need to remember that this delighting in what God has given us is for the purpose of pointing us back towards God. We're going to talk about that more next week as we talk about the idea of meditating on God or spending time with God on Sabbath. But we need to realize that this chance to delight is about us becoming more and more deeply in the presence of God, us walking more and more deeply into that presence. And another piece of it that I think we have to be honest about as we look at it is that we have to wrestle with the reality that we don't have the same delights as others do. What Callie, my wife, delights in may or may not be the same thing as what I delight in. What my kids delight in may just exhaust me. It may seem like work. So does that mean that those things, because they're not delight for me, can't happen on the Sabbath? Because if they do so, then I'm not delighting. I don't think so. I don't think that that's the understanding that Isaiah is trying to give us here. I think that it's important for us to grasp that a part of Sabbath is about us giving delight to others. So because I love Callie, my kids, and others, I should find delight in helping make sure that they experience delight. I should look for ways to bring delight into the life of other people that I love. And in that practice, in the practice of allowing them to experience delight, bringing delight into their life, I should find delight. So someone might say, I like to stay home and she likes to go out with her friends all the time. Or they might say that all they ever want to do is play outside and I just want to sit inside and read a book. Yes, that's truth in our homes and in our relationships with other people. So what do? We talk to one another. We make a plan. We switch it up and do different things on different times in different weeks as we practice Sabbath. But we are always committed to making sure that we're giving others an opportunity for delight also. You see, Sabbath, when it is done rightly, restores relationships and the balance of power. And surely this should include honoring others by giving them delight. So the last several weeks, as we've talked through Sabbath, we've tried to give you some really practical, hands-on how-tos. So let me give you a couple for this week as you think about the idea of the blessing of delight in Sabbath. Here's the first one. Create an extensive list of things that bring you delight. A few weeks ago, we talked about maybe just coming up with 2 or 3 things, but create a longer list. And they may be big things and they may be small things. It may include grand adventures, but also things as simple as a walk in the park. But what is it that allows you to experience Sabbath delight? Begin to write those things down and think about them and reflect on them. Second, create a list of things that delight people you love. What do your kids enjoy? What does your spouse love to do? What is it your friends like to do? Look for things that you can do to help them experience delight. 3, do these things. So you've come up with a list of things that bring you delight and a list of things that bring other people delight. So now do them. Don't just write them down or think about them, but begin to embrace and participate in them. Some of them may become weekly activities. Some of them may only happen on occasion. Some of them may be one-time journeys or excursions that you take to experience a really kind of over-the-top, delightful Sabbath experience, but actually pursue these things that bring you delight. Sorry. 4th one, last one. Be intentional about noticing beauty and joy around you. It's there, but sometimes it has to be searched for. Sometimes we have to slow down in order to notice the beauty, the joy that surrounds us. So make it a practice of noticing these joys and these beauties while you're in it. But I would encourage you to also make it a practice of trying to come back at the end of each day and looking back on the moments where you experienced beauty and joy. Where did you experience the joy of Christ in your day? Whether it's a Sabbath or not, where did you experience the joy of Christ? And then as you think about Sabbath, try to recreate some of those experiences during your Sabbath practice. So 4 things, pretty simple. A list, extensive list of things that bring you delight, a list of things that delight the people you love. Begin to do these things. And then fourth, be intentional about noticing beauty and joy around you. Now, one final word, and it's kind of connected to this last piece, but even more significantly, it's connected to the reality of where we find ourselves in life right now. Finding Sabbath in a pandemic is really, really hard. It is hard to separate work life from home life or play or Sabbath or all the different aspects of life when you never change spaces. It's hard to feel like you're productive during your work time. So because of that, it's hard to separate and not work during times that maybe shouldn't be work time because you weren't as productive during work hours as you thought you should have been. So as things close down, and we're watching that happen all around us now in Zambia, as we as a church decide not to meet in person for a time, it is even more important for you and me to be intentional about our Sabbath practice. It is more important than ever for us to be intentional about stopping and resting, or we can almost, without knowing it, be overwhelmed by all that's taking place around us. It's even more important that we be intentional to find delight when grief is all around us, when we're overwhelmed by grief of the virus, the pandemic, what continues to spread. Now, this doesn't mean ignore the grief that's in our life. It doesn't mean ignore it. In fact, I think we should actually embrace it and call it out and own the reality that we are walking through times of grief. And with that we should recognize that God has this incredible ability to bring beauty to grief. We need to notice the grief and the beauty of these times and thank God for being present in both. But it is so very important that we be intentional to commit to Sabbath time alone with God in the midst of the closures that are taking place as the virus is out of control here in Zambia. So as we continue to talk about this in the weeks ahead, I encourage you, pursue with great intentionality this practice of Sabbath. Thanks for being a part of this. We hope that it creates an opportunity for you to meet with the Lord, even from your homes or wherever you may be using it. So grace and peace be with you as you go.